Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly and I'm a mixed media artist who specializes in gouache paint, ink work, and sometimes I do other stuff. And in this week's video, I want to show you guys how I painted the galaxy portion of this butterfly painting I've been working on. In last week's video, I showed you how I did these fiery butterflies. And this week, I'm going to show you a little bit more in depth how I got that galaxy effect. So let's get into it. Alright, so first things first, I'm getting my Winsor & Newton. Unfortunately, it's Winsor & Newton. If you guys don't know, I have beef with some of their paint. Because numerous times I've gotten it off of Amazon, and I don't know if it's just sitting in a warehouse somewhere, but it tends to get almost like curdled, especially the yellow. What's up with that? Winsor & Newton, hello. You know, it's fine gouache paint, but I'm just like, I don't know, I've never had that with Mgram, which is my favorite brand, so, you know. Anyways, but I'm just placing that pigment around the edges of the butterfly wings, especially in areas where there's literal fire being emitted. And I'm then using a damp, clean brush to lightly feather out the edges where I placed the yellow, and what this is going to do is create a smoother gradient. What I'm kind of going for is a glowing effect from the flames. After that, I am using my beloved Mgram & Company Cobalt Blue Gouache pigment. I am placing that liberally in the background. I'm kind of going for this swirling effect, almost like the butterflies are leaving a trail of galaxy, star cluster, nebula things in their trail. Kind of like a yin-yang moment, but not really. Just that kind of swooping shape is what I'm referring to. And what I'm really trying to do is wiggle my brush in random areas in circular motions to kind of create this cloud diffused look. And I'm doing this to purposefully create a patchy look to this background. I don't want it to just be all blue. I want it to be a little uneven because I want it to mimic those, you know, when you look at a picture of a galaxy and it looks like there's clouds made of gas or something up in there. That's what I'm going for. In some areas, they're going to be a little bit more bright than others due to star clusters. So I'm also dotting some white gouache paint sporadically, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm using a brush that is kind of dry, honestly, and I'm really scrubbing that paint in circular motions. I'm trying really hard not to control the outcome too much. With organic shapes like this, you really do want to let the paint create their own organic forms. Otherwise, if you try to control it too much, you'll end up with something that looks artificial, and you might end up with some clouds that look kind of same-ish, splotched along the whole trail. What you want is to allow the paint to take shape for the dry brushing and circles to create their own random abstract shapes, and then when you see those shapes starting to form, work with them. In another video, I mentioned this tip, and it seemed to help a lot of people actually, is if you're really struggling to do this, use your non-dominant hand. For me, that's my left hand. If you're really struggling with it, try using your hand you don't use so much. That way you have less control and you'll be able to kind of lessen that need to really control the paint, because in order to get this organic look, you want the paint to kind of just move on its own and create abstract forms on its own. Now, because we're going for a glowy diffused look, you'll notice I'm repeating the same process over and over again. I put down cobalt blue. I put down some dioxazine purple. I dry brush that into circles, then dot in areas with some titanium white gouache paint, dry brush in some circles, and repeat the process but get more specific every time. And what this is going to do when you get more specific with your placement, especially of the white gouache paint, is create a really soft airbrushed look to the glowing areas of the galaxy clouds that have more star clusters in them, because that's really what I'm trying to go for, is that glowy look. So it really is the same thing over and over again, except you get more specific with every single layer. I'm really trying to avoid leaving straight up just white gouache paint without it being blended at all until the very last step. There's also some areas in the galaxy where I am creating some stars, but to make them look like they're more diffused and in the distance to give you that depth of field effect, I'm blurring them slightly with a dry brush and just blurring them in that same circular motion I'm using. It's not until the final step where I very selectively use white gouache paint on its own for a very stark high point of highlight, and I'm saving that for areas where I know I really want to pack a punch. The less you use straight up white paint, the more powerful it's going to be when you do use it, because there's going to be a lot more colors and values surrounding it to compare it to. If you use white gouache paint for all the stars, it's going to flatten the effect. So that's why I'm having some of the stars blurred in the background, and I'm slowly layering up to the point where finally I decide, hey, right here and there in these really bright clusters of stars in these clouds, I'll dot a little white star there that's completely white, and you got to use it sparingly and then it will count, and that contrast with everything else going on will actually give you that depth of field ethereal look. Another thing I'm using very sparingly to create more of a glowing effect is a metallic silver marker, and I'm dotting just random little tiny stars throughout. That way, when you see the painting from different angles, it literally sparkles, which is awesome. Side note, for the dry brushing, I highly recommend using a brush you don't care about because it will get frayed. It's good to have a few brushes that are specifically there to just be absolutely destroyed. Like, that's their job, right? And then I also use a nail art brush to create very, very, very tiny stars. Last but not least, I decided to get out my Winsor & Newton gold ink. Oh my goodness, it is so bright and metallic, I love it. It's not an overwhelmingly yellow gold either. It reads more like a champagne gold. I really like it. It looks really nice. I'm dotting that in areas where I want there to look like sparks coming from the butterfly wings, and I also think that this is a good transition into the star clusters of the galaxy. And to further enhance that transition from the fire into the galaxy, I used some yellow pan pastels. It's basically just a compact version of chalk pastels that you can use a makeup brush with, and I'm applying that very gently onto the edges to create a very smooth gradient of yellow to blue from the wings into the galaxy background. Alrighty, and with that being said, we are done. In next week's video, I'll show you my process on how I drew the border for this piece. If you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing. And I will see you next week. Bye!